everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Off to the beginning of May. I wanted to touch base with you guys and talk a little bit more about this transiting Venus in Gemini coming into a square with Neptune. I'm going to talk to you guys about how this is playing out archetypally in the world, touching on some of the hottest news kind of topics and just some musings from my own life. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you click the button below and you're subscribed. Also drop me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and let me know if you're a first-time viewer. I'd love to hear from you guys. So if you guys are not already aware, I touch on all of these topics throughout the horoscopes, so you can always check out the horoscopes to see how that is affecting each of the various rising signs for this month. I will not be taking you through the 12 signs for this video, so if you want to know how it's going to impact you, check out that video. But Venus square Neptune, I'm calling this episode catfished. I'm sure many of you guys are aware of that term. If you guys are not aware of what that term means, basically it has become a kind of common term to be catfished, meaning being deceived or tricked into a relationship or a connection by someone who has created a false identity or a false persona online. So this term actually originates from the 2010 documentary Catfish, which follows a man who was tricked into an online relationship with a woman who had fabricated a false identity and profile. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be catfished, but because Venus rules relationships, money, investments, values, there is a little bit of this catfishing energy in the skies. So you guys want to be mindful with the square, especially with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. Fake photos, false information, fake social media profiles, all of that stuff is definitely going to be going on. I've been seeing it on Twitter. I've been seeing it on social media. Lots of new scams, okay? So phone calls, text message, voicemails, all kinds of things that may trick you into signing into accounts. Maybe some of you guys have gotten some of those phishing emails of people trying to hack your socials. I feel like I'm getting like 2 or 3 emails from Twitter regularly. People trying to figure out my password. I don't know why anybody would want my identity, but whatever. And I guess this is an amazing opportune moment to let you guys know because unfortunately this does happen on social media. I'm a little bit more active on Instagram than I am on other platforms. But you know, if you ever get a message from me, a DM from me, it is not me. I am not going to send you a message trying to solicit a reading. Please always, I appreciate it if you guys report those pages and let me know. Unfortunately, it's happening to a lot of readers out in the interwebs. So trying to do my best to pick those up and report them when I can. But unfortunately, sometimes they want to copy your profile and then they block you. You know, it's just like tricky. Anyway. Catfishing, right? So catfishing financially, catfishing in terms of relationships, that's stuff that you want to be mindful of out in the world throughout this transit that's going to be taking place this week. Be very cautious when interacting with people online, especially when it comes to forming close relationships, sharing personal information, private information, especially logins, passwords, screen names, things like that, or any transfers that you're going to be initiating, because there can be some pretty significant consequences from this week, including emotional trauma, financial loss, and damage to reputation. So let me give you guys all the rundown of when this is going to be taking place. That's going to be happening pretty much from May the 3rd through the 5th. Maybe you're already feeling it, right? Especially if you're a Venus ruled chart. So if you are a Taurus or a Libra, rising in particular, you're going to be feeling this more strongly. Or if you are a Pisces rising chart, because all 3 of these are ruled by the planets that are involved in this particular square. Who's going to feel this the most? Also 25 to 27 degrees of the mutable signs. So Gemini, Virgo, Sag, and Pisces. You're going to be feeling this pretty strongly, especially because we also have Ceres involved in the mix. So I'll talk a little bit about how that kind of plays into that in a second. But if you have any personal planets, right, around 25 to, let's say, 27 degrees, especially of Pisces or Gemini, you might want to pay extra attention. And this is going to be taking place at 26 degrees, okay? So we see the square coming in. Venus forming the square. This is an opening 90-degree angle since Venus is conjunction to Neptune, and squares are always a bit combative or a bit confrontational, which we don't typically see with Venus aspects. So this one's going to be a little bit more foggy. It's going to be more about illusions. It's not going to be combativeness that comes at you directly. It's going to be something that can be indirect, or it can be something that is not seen, or slightly invisible, maybe a little passive. And 26 degrees relates to Taurus. Okay, so you guys have seen me talking a lot about this Mercury retrograde, and so many different ways in which the retrograde is being brought through other transits. Obviously, we know that Mercury is traditionally the ruler of Gemini, so we've got Venus in a mercurial sign, and we've got Mercury in a Venusian sign, so we've got some mutual reception there. So even bits and pieces of this Venus square Neptune is still bringing our attention back to this reorganization that's taking place. I would say the simplification that's taking place, this sorting and sifting through our values, through our possessions, through our relationships, our investments, our banking. Like, that's a huge theme. There's a lot of rearranging going on. And I want to give you guys just some food for thought, just some like trigger words for 26 degrees, being that connection to Taurus. Somebody asked me last time I used this book on one of my videos where it is. So this is Nicola's degree theory. From what I understand, I believe his family, or maybe I think it was his daughter, if I remember correctly, they're hopefully going to be brought to Amazon soon. So you used to be able to get these books online through his website, but it looks like we're going to have to wait a little bit longer to get copies of this, but that's okay. I'll share it with you until then. So degree theory is a theory that I like to use in my readings. I find that it's incredibly accurate in predicting astrology. I also really like to use it in better assessing Placidus charts, also like rectifying charts as well. So we break down the zodiac, all 29 degrees to various signs. So 2, 14, and 26 degrees are all going to be connected to the sign of Taurus. And so these are just some key words that you're going to hear that may somehow be tied into this particular Venus square Neptune. So money, wallet, things that have to do with money. So I think of like, Venus being about resources, and the square to Neptune is like money vanishing, right? Like throwing your load of laundry into, a local laundromat and walking across the street to get something to drink, coming back and realizing that the wallet is missing, or that you washed the credit cards and, they're nowhere to be found. Mercury being tied to this Venus transit also can be, water damage that we may have, especially to vehicles or to gadgets. I'll talk a little bit about how these squares deal with storms as well, and visibility issues. It also reminds me a lot of like filters, things that are filtered or manipulated, that might be edited or kind of changed. That might be something else that kind of comes up as well. But the big one for me is banks, banking, bank employees, the economy, bankers, estates, food, kitchens, nature, the throat, neck, or vocal cords, to grow or to raise, to possess, and what is mine. So conversations revolving around where are my resources? What do I have? Where is it invested? Where have I stashed the cash, especially because Neptune can be hidden places. And anything in regards to things that are green. So that can be things that grow, but once again, also money. And singing, or anything to do with like music or the voice. Okay, so these are just some keywords to keep in mind. But the square in particular, this 90-degree aspect, is an angle between the two planets. And when Venus, the planet of love and relationships, comes into discord with Neptune, the planet of illusion and spirituality, there can be this feeling of confusion, okay? So it can manifest a couple of different ways. There's pros and cons to this. Venus in Gemini really wants mental stimulation, right? It wants to be able to communicate. It wants to get all these ideas out there. It wants to exchange, especially in terms of ideas and relationships, and it values communication, wit, and flirting or intellectual banter. But when it's in a square aspect with Neptune and Pisces, the lines between reality and fantasy can become blurred. So we can see issues with dishonesty. We can see issues with confusion, with lack of communication. Neptune brings this dreamy, idealistic, romantic quality to relationships, but it can also create some issues where there are illusions or delusions that are very difficult to see our way through. So it reminds me of filters, especially with Venus being in Gemini, how we are manipulating what we look like, especially in photos or in videos or audio. I wonder if we're going to see some videos that are going to circulate about fear, manipulation regarding things that are going on in media, or regarding things that are going on, in regards to finances, especially like skewed or like distorted like information or graphs, because it can be like pictures. The other thing that we see with Venus square Neptune aspects is this tendency to like want to put someone or something on a pedestal and idealize a partner or a relationship, which oftentimes can lead to disappointment when reality fails to live up to this fantasy that we have created. So, in my mind, it's, things may sound really good, and there may be some amazing sales calls taking place throughout this next week. Some people that are really encouraging you to jump on opportunities, buy things, invest in things. You'll be tempted possibly to buy something online or look at a photo of something, or maybe you match with somebody and they sound or look really good, but the question is are they going to live up to how they have portrayed themselves? There can definitely be, issues with confusion or misunderstandings in communication, because Venus is in a communication related sign. Because Neptune can cloud Venus in some way, and the communication style is not going to be direct, it's going to be a little misleading. We may also notice that there is a desire to escape from reality or avoid confrontations in relationships, leading to some passive-aggressive behavior or emotional distancing. So we're definitely going to notice this feeling of, in some relationships, ghosting, distance, not responding, changes in communication patterns. But on a positive note, this aspect can bring opportunities for creativity, inspiration, imagination, a deeper spiritual connection in relationships. For many of us, it may enhance our intuition and empathy, making it easier to turn into others' emotions and their needs. So we may be able to practice empathy. Ultimately, this aspect will also come up really talking a lot about where there can be miscommunications when it comes to what we value and what we need in relationships. So just remember that, there's pros and cons to all transits, but because of that connection with Venus being the dispositor of all of these placements in Taurus, and that rearrangement that's going on, when it comes to talking about money or resources, what we own, what we possess, what we're buying, what we're spending, this is going to be a reoccurring theme that's going to keep coming up. I could see some people going back and forth about whether or not they want to sign on the dotted line to buy something. It's really important to read the fine print, not because of the retrograde, but because of this square, especially if you're looking at buying property because of Venus's connection to Taurus, buying cars, buying gadgets, things of that nature. Just anticipate that when you see some things in person, whether it's going and meeting a person for the first time, or you buy that object or something off of eBay, it may not necessarily look like its picture. Now, another piece of the puzzle here is also Ceres. And so I don't always talk a lot about any of the asteroid goddesses, but in this situation, I think it's important because Ceres is actually getting ready to station. I believe on the 6th, it's going to go direct. So if we look at the Venus square Neptune and bring Ceres into this, it's actually Ceres in opposition to Neptune and Venus square Ceres. So it's making Venus the focal point of this mutable T-square. So that's why I feel like we're really going to feel this out in the world, especially the mutable signs, especially like Sagittarius placements, because you've got placements there that's going to create a grand mutable cross. When Ceres, the asteroid goddess, squares Venus, it brings up themes relating to healing the child-parent dynamic. So in a natal chart, this square, if left unhealed, there can be projections of these issues upon romantic partners, and it can lead to unhealthy or unsatisfying relationships. Ceres is that goddess that is associated with nurturing and caring and mothering and tending to. It is a goddess that deals with growth, and you know, she is known also as Demeter. It's all about the life and everything that the abundance that she really protects on the earth, right? So we're seeing some really interesting aspects between Venus and Neptune, but then when we throw Ceres into the mix, there can also be other related issues, you know, relating to identity, because Ceres does have this need to nurture and take care of the sign that it's within. So not necessarily Virgos per se, but Virgo related topics. So the squares to like Venus and Gemini can be issues where sexuality can cause friction in relationships. In order to create safe and welcoming space, you know, this square brings up the theme of feelings of unattractiveness, unworthiness, questioning, you know, their identity in relationships, what they need physically or sexually in relationships. There can also be themes revolving around, you know, needing to find healthier dynamics in relationships. Reclaiming one's sexuality is a central theme. Nurturing equality in the relationship dynamic is essential. With Ceres, we can also see issues relating to food, eating disorders, beauty obsessions, things that can encourage us, especially with the opposition to Neptune, to seek some kind of spiritual grounding or therapy. Professional therapy can be another theme. It's not unusual when I see Ceres-Neptune aspects, themes that come up with feeling isolated or through deep feelings of emotion and separation and loss and grief, that there can be problems with depression or there can be eating disorders. That's not unusual. So that may factor in some way, especially because Virgo deals with habits and Neptune does deal with medication or drugs or anything in regards to what is hidden. So we may see themes revolving around relationships having challenges because, you know, there isn't clear communication or feeling safe or secure, and that can trigger in some individuals emotional or you know, food related disorders or drug related relapses as a result of this square, right? Which I'm not these are heavy topics, but we may see this kind of playing out. Ceres does deal with, like I said, protecting the earth. And so some of the themes that you're going to hear me talk about today is some stuff that's been coming out in the media, Gemini, where there has been some challenges to protected spaces, right? Sacred spaces, but also some issues in regards to questioning whether or not there is safety and security within certain financial institutions. So kind of bringing this into the recent news, these are just some things that I've noticed throughout this last week or so as these squares have been setting up that kind of piqued my attention. One of which is the Treasury Chief, Yellen Warren, Yellen warns Congress that the Treasury may run out of cash as soon as June of 2023. So that's kind of scary. You know, she's warning lawmakers to raise or suspend the debt limit and has warned that payments may default and be devastating for the U.S. economy. So that's a really big deal, right? So basically, if the U.S. fails to meet its debt obligations sooner than expected, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned in a letter to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Yellen said drop tax receipts meant the U.S. could hit the debt ceiling as soon as June 1st, earlier than Wall Street and Washington had estimated. So tying this into the square, media, right? Gemini, a woman, a prominent woman who's speaking out and talking about, you know, finances and resources, Venus and Gemini, cause for concern, the square to Neptune, whether or not, you know, this is going to be stable or we're going to start to see things continue to kind of break down and dissolve, and what our responsibility is right, to others or to systems, or to, be a representative. It's very Virgo, or a support system for resources, especially in the United States. So, that's one way this can play out. It all funnels back to still the retrograde in Taurus, and I think this reorganization that's going on financially and with the banking system. Mercury stopping short of that conjunction with Uranus, where there is going to be some rocket and roll and news that's going to come out within the next month as a result of some of these banking collapses. Speaking of banking collapses, as of this week, JP Morgan Chase takes over First Republic after biggest U.S. bank failure since 2008. So here goes another one. The dominoes are still falling. That Venus square Neptune can bring up themes revolving around whether or not certain structures fall, right? And whether or not they're going to be changing hands, because Venus is an immutable sign. So it can represent, one bank becoming a part of another bank. And so there's some kind of duality there. JP Morgan acquired all of First Republic's deposits and a substantial amount of assets. The acquisition comes after regulators took possession of First Republic, resulting in the third failure of the American bank since March. First Republic set off a new wave of concern last month with the revelation that it lost more deposits than it expected in the month of March. So, hey, we've got an eclipse coming, right? The Venus square Neptune is going to be a part of that eclipse. And this is a South Node eclipse in Scorpio, so this is going to be like the cosmic purge. And it's going to be hosted by a debilitated Mars in Cancer tri-Neptune. So there is going to be more that's, I think, is going to start affecting the economy, especially in regards to home mortgages. And I've been saying for some time, like not to be doom or gloom, but this financial rumbling that was going to start happening this year was going to be very reminiscent of 2008. Also in the news, Florida tornadoes over this last week, right? Pretty crazy. Extreme storms in South Florida with cars flipping over. And we know that mutable squares produce some very extreme weather, right? So we've got Venus in a sign that is associated with air. We've got the square that's happening to Neptune. So it can represent air and water, right? Tornadoes, typically we see that with hurricanes, but it is happening off of the coast. Lots of changes going on, obviously, with the earth, and then the loss and devastation can be the Ceres square aspect, and flooding as well. I know that there was some flooding that was also taking place in Florida from storms over the last few weeks. Specifically North Palm Beach. So Florida on Sunday was slammed with a second consecutive day of severe weather after a destructive tornado spun through the residential area of South Florida, flipping over cars, snapping trees, knocking out power for thousands of residents. Oh, power issues, you say? Mercury retrograde, sun coming into contact with Uranus. Yeah, we're going to see more of that. And where extreme weather is impacting our ability to travel, move, communicate, fly, like go places. So that's also factored into this. And I do believe that it's going to be a hot kind of speaking point on the media, right? Because we're going to be hearing more about how these may be, cause of effect of global warming, and we're going to hear more talk about environmental stuff. That's not unusual with any aspects that we see in the sign of Pisces, but also the sextiles now that we're seeing to Taurus. It's where we're seeing things that are kind of breaking down or falling apart as a result of natural disasters or weather, right? Taurus is the earth. Speaking of disasters, the FAA sued over SpaceX Starship launch program following the April explosion. Those of you guys who are not aware, SpaceX conducted a test flight of the largest rocket ever built on April 20th, resulting in an extensive launch pad damage and hurling heavy debris into a sensitive habitat nearby. I just heard about this today. My husband was telling me about it. Environmental and cultural heritage nonprofits are suing the Federal Aviation Administration on Monday over the agency's dealings with SpaceX because they gave the green light to SpaceX to be able to have this launch. Among other things, the five plaintiffs alleged that the FAA failed to conduct an appropriate environmental review by authorizing SpaceX to move ahead with its Starship launch plans in Boca Chica, Texas. Basically, hearing about how the debris is affecting, I guess, reserved areas, environmental reserves or, you know, areas where there are natives that are claiming that there's damage. You know, I went and was doing some research and was seeing like some of the pieces that were kind of left behind. I heard about how people who were nearby who were watching the launch also had all kinds of damage to like vehicles and other things that they were anticipating. So yeah, I think that is really definitely touching on this series aspect of, you know, where is it our responsibility to protect in the environment. It just so happens that it's on the coast of Texas. And then, believe it or not, space is more so connected to Neptune, I believe, in my practice than Uranus. But we get it both ways. So whether you're looking at the fact that, you know, Venus is coming into a square with Neptune and in opposition with Ceres, so it's what we're launching into the air and how it's impacting the environment, or if you're looking at it from the perspective of all these planets in Taurus square Pluto, how there is a need to really pay attention to what's going on with the planet as a result of exploration or change and transformation with space. This can also be billionaires, Pluto and Aquarius, you know, the effects that they're having on the masses or on other people or on the planet as a result of some kind of exploration or the investment into exploration of space. As many of you guys may or may not know, SpaceX is, you know, run by Elon Musk. That's one of his many projects. This set off a big Venus, Neptune kind of alarm for me. Just recently watching the interview that Bill Maher had with Elon Musk, where he was discussing the woke mind virus, Twitter takeover, AI, during a real-time interview with Bill Maher. If you guys haven't already seen that, I recommend checking it out. At the very least, you can sit there and cringe and watch some of Elon's really weird responses. But it brought something up for me because if I remember correctly, he's a Cancer Sun, Venus in Gemini. And, you know, the media, right, is very Gemini. And to watch Venus come into a square with Neptune, Neptune does rule viruses. We're going to hear more about viruses in the news. It's going to be a thing. By the way, building off of the video that I did most recently when I said to you I was hearing about biolabs not releasing something, but apparently being like hijacked. It was in Sudan. So just going and looking at the news today, you know, the World Health Organization is like warning people like that, you know, a biolab was taken over and they have like viruses and this, that, and the other, and they're being released. Whether or not that's true, that's neither here nor there. But you want to watch out because this is also part of the Venus square Neptune of, you know, how things can affect your health. Because we have Venus in a mercurial related sign, and whether or not, you know, we can actually believe what we're hearing in the news, right? So that's another thing. But the woke mind virus, this sense of like really touching on what is and is not healthy in terms of communication and, you know, freedom of communication and free speech. And this square to Neptune, that the virus in itself is the fact that people are afraid to speak out, that, you know, we're having a lot of challenges in relationships and that people are like kind of taking a step back and, you know, feeling afraid to speak out because they're going to get canceled. So he kind of bonded with Bill Maher over this conversation and brought up some really interesting and some really valid points about that. So that really kind of piqued my interest. I didn't know this. This is something that I found out, but apparently May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So that's perfect with a Venus square Neptune kind of coming into play. You know, it's a major trending hashtag right now on Twitter, right? Social media. Venus can be health related. It can be about relations also to other people. So I'm hoping that this is going to spark a lot of people wanting to share that it's Mental Health Awareness Month and, you know, talking about their own personal experiences and also possibly creating more funding or more programs or more hotlines and things for people to be able to become aware of and utilize and feel like they have some kind of support, right? Very, very Venus and Neptune square, especially with these two. You know, it's like not knowing who you can talk to about your problems or you know, questioning whether or not you know, you can confide in a partner or in a friend, and like having that opportunity to be able to reach out and talk to somebody, Neptune, that may be super compassionate and lend, you know, a helping hand or be willing to give you some feedback and just kind of hear what you have to say. So that's really cool with that transit happening. I was watching this, it was just the other night, and very, very Venus square Neptune. Those of you guys who are looking for a new interesting thing to watch on Netflix, I believe it's called The Longest Third Date. And so many Venus Neptune aspects in this, it's not even funny. It takes place in 2020. It's a really short, like mini documentary. It's like an hour and 15 minutes. But it's about this couple in New York City that meet in, I think it's March of 2020, right when the pandemic was starting. And they first connect, they meet on Hinge, and they go back and forth, and they have like 2 dates. And then on the third date, the man in the connection is like, hey, like let's, trips are really cheap. It was like right when people were not sure what was going to happen with the pandemic. And they end up buying like a $200 flight to Costa Rica, and they go to Costa Rica for what's supposed to be a couple days. Venus square Neptune aspect, so crazy. So they meet online, right, on some kind of app. They don't really know what each other look like or much about each other until they connect, Venus square Neptune. They meet, and there's some sense of like not really knowing if the other person is into it, and they have another date, and then they're like, yeah, there's a connection here. And then they go on this trip together, and they get to know each other a little better. And they come from 2 very different backgrounds. He's from like the East Coast, and her family, I guess, they both live in New York, but her family is from the Pacific Northwest, but she's Vietnamese and he's American. So they have some cultural differences, but there still is this attraction that brings them together. And they go on this trip to Costa Rica, and while they're in Costa Rica, I think it's like a day or 2 before, their flight gets canceled. Anyway, I don't want to spoil the whole thing, but they end up spending an extended period of time in Costa Rica, if you can put 2 and 2 together, because while they were there is when the whole world shut down. So what's funny is that he was trying to make it as like a vlogger and a social media person, very Venus and Gemini. And he's filming all these aspects of his life, and he's filming the trip with them together, and he's always got his camera out, and it's cool because he's documenting what he thought was going to be the trip, but it ends up being this whole process of like an unfolding scenario that seems like the end of the world, but it ends up being this whole experience that brings the 2 of them closer together. And months later they end up finally being able to go back to the United States. But I mean, it's like months being stuck in a foreign country, not knowing the partner that you're with, and having to go through a whole slew of what is real life relationship experiences just suddenly all at one time. And all of the emotions and the feelings and the confusion and like being too close to each other, and then coming out of it and realizing that there is something really beautiful there. But also highlighting their own issues and their own insecurities, and bringing up their own problems with previous relationships and whether or not they were ready for relationships, and also being really honest with themselves and other people. There was a lot of things that came up about honesty. So definitely something I would recommend. It's so Venus square Neptune. If you're into watching really interesting real life love stories, like I love all the pandemic love stories. I've heard so many throughout the years of like where people came together. This was a really great example of this square. And obviously, like I said, throughout this next week or so, be mindful of where you can be more open, be mindful of where you can be more compassionate. I would love to hear some of your guys' stories, how this Venus square Neptune transit is impacting you. So feel free to leave comments below, and watch out for those catfishing text messages and those catfishing calls. It can definitely be a thing that can get some people into some sticky situations. So if something looks or sounds a little too good to be true, just hold off, wait till after this starts to shift, especially right when we start to see Venus change signs and come into Cancer. And right around the time that Venus is coming into a trine with Saturn and also the moon, right around the 13th of May, we're going to see a lot more stability and security. That's going to be happening with relationships and investments and finances. Things are going to stabilize a little bit. But any which way you slice it, I mean, not just the square, but the retrograde and the eclipse, there is this sense of some people feeling like they have to like really release and they have to let go, or that they're losing something, or that they're having to give something up. People are really going to be in their feelings with some of these transits throughout this next week. So if you're somebody who's experiencing, some misconnections in a relationship, some communication issues, if you're feeling like there's some issues of clarity, take a step back. Right now is not really the time to be making any serious decisions or any investments. And just give it until right around mid-month when we see that Venus trine Saturn, and then things are going to stabilize a little bit more. I'll be back on Thursday. I'm going to be putting together a Venus through Cancer video. I did not touch on that in the horoscope, so I want to talk about how that's going to be, I think, a really helpful transit. It's really important to be watching what's going on with Venus also because of the connection to the North Node. So, this square that's taking place is a softening and a releasing, and in some cases a letting go if something is not going to be solid. But on the flip side, if there is some questioning, or there is some need to have clarity, or to clear the air, or have a better understanding in a relationship or a financial situation, some of these squares can come up, I think, to better kind of usher in the Venus trine Saturn and to have the discussion, so that way there can be more clarity and commitment. So stay tuned for that Venus through the 12 rising signs in Cancer on Thursday. I hope you guys are enjoying your week so far. I will see you then, and until next time, you guys take care.